The chamber doors had not opened in 3 cycles when Ambassador Kale 7 made the mistake of laughing. Not a nervous laugh. Not a diplomatic chuckle designed to soften a tense moment. A real one, sharp and sudden and completely inappropriate, ripping through the crystalline silence of the Velkan throne room like a stone thrown through glass. Every head turned. There were 43 beings in that chamber. Kale 7 had counted them twice during the 4-hour wait, because counting was what you did when your hands wanted to shake and you couldn't let them. Representatives from 11 star systems. 6 members of the Velkan High Council. 12 royal guards in obsidian armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And her, Queen Seraphirel, seated on a throne carved from a single piece of collapsed star material, wearing an expression that had not changed in 4 hours, which meant it had not changed since before Kale 7 had arrived, which meant it was not an expression at all but simply the face she chose to show the universe when she had already decided something. The laugh had come because of the child. She was small, no more than 8 cycles old by human reckoning, though Kale 7 had been told Velkan children aged differently, their growth tied to stellar proximity rather than simple time. She sat 3 steps below the throne on a cushion the color of deep space, and she had been sitting there the entire 4 hours without moving, without speaking, without seeming to breathe, which was impressive even for a Velkan. Kale 7 had almost forgotten she existed. Then, the child had leaned forward, just slightly, and whispered something to the guard standing nearest to her, a whisper loud enough for Kale 7 to catch, because his translator implant was military-grade and indiscriminate. She had said, "Why does the human keep counting us? Does he think we might disappear?" And Kale 7, who was terrified and exhausted and had not slept in 36 hours and had spent 4 of those hours standing perfectly still while an alien queen decided whether to end his civilization's bid for galactic membership or simply end his civilization, had laughed. The sound died almost instantly. But it had existed. It could not exist. Queen Seraphirel's eyes moved to him. They were silver, not figuratively, not as a poetic description of a pale color, but literally silver, like liquid mercury given the shape of irises. They did not blink. They simply arrived on his face and stayed there, and Kale 7 felt the precise and specific sensation of being measured in units he did not have names for. He did not apologize. Apologizing would have been worse. Every briefing he'd received before this mission had said the same thing in different words. The Velkan interpret apology as admission of wrongness, and admitting wrongness in court is interpreted as a challenge to the Queen's judgment in allowing you to be there. So he stood straight, kept his breathing even, and met those silver eyes. The child was watching him now too. Up close, or closer, since she had not moved, but her attention had. She was striking in the way that things built for a purpose were striking. Her features were sharp and deliberate. Her hands rested flat on her knees with the practiced stillness of someone trained to it. But her eyes, which were silver like her mother's except shot through with veins of gold that the Queen's lacked, were alive with something unguarded and urgent. Curiosity. Kale 7 had read every available document on Velkan culture, history, and diplomatic protocol. He could recite the 17 gestures of formal respect in the correct order, explain the significance of the throne room's hexagonal geometry, and identify by sight the rank markings of every guard in the room. But nothing he had read had prepared him for what it felt like to be the object of a Velkan child's genuine curiosity, because apparently no human had ever been in this room long enough to experience it. He had been brought here to negotiate. Humanity's application for galactic membership had been pending for 11 years. 11 years of submitted documentation, cultural exchanges, diplomatic missions, and polite delays from the Velkan sovereignty, who controlled 40% of accessible jump routes and whose endorsement was the only one that actually mattered. 11 years of being told that humanity was being considered, that the process took time, that patience was itself a form of respect. Then, 6 weeks ago, without explanation, the Velkan had summoned a human representative to appear before the Queen. Not to a neutral station. Not to a border world. Here. To Velkan Prime. To the throne room of Seraphirel herself. Nobody knew what that meant. Every analyst had a theory. Most of the theories were bad. The one Kale 7 tried not to think about was the most popular, that the Velkan had already decided against humanity, and this was the formal rejection, and he had been brought here personally because personal rejection from a queen meant finality. No appeals. No second applications. He had laughed in the throne room of the woman who might be ending his species' future. And Now she was still looking at him, and, he realized, with the specific clarity that only came in moments of genuine crisis, that the child's question had been the first honest thing that had happened in this room all day. Does he think we might disappear? He had been counting them because he was afraid. And the child had seen it. And he had laughed because she had seen it so cleanly, so without malice, so simply, the way children named things that adults had learned to dress in silence. Queen Seraphfarel rose from her throne. The room held its breath. She did not speak immediately. That was the first unusual thing. In every account Kale 7 had reviewed, the Queen was described as decisive, a ruler who moved from silence to command without the human habit of gathering herself visibly. But she stood at the top of the throne steps and looked at him, and the looking lasted long enough that two of the High Council members exchanged glances they clearly thought were invisible. Then, she said, in perfect standard, not through a translator, but with her own voice, which was lower than he'd expected and carried the faint resonance of a much larger space, as if her body was merely the instrument and the sound came from somewhere deeper, explained the laugh. 43 beings in the room. Not one of them moved. Kale 7 had two options. He could perform, craft an answer that was diplomatic and careful and perfectly calibrated to cause no offense. He had done this for 11 years. Humanity had done this for 11 years. And they were here, in a throne room, being assessed for whether they deserved to exist in galactic space. Or he could answer the way the child had asked the question. Directly. Without armor. Your daughter saw something I was trying to hide, he said. She named it accurately. I laughed because she was right, and because being seen clearly, even by a child, is a relief when you've been performing composure for 4 hours. Silence. The child's gold-veined eyes went wide. Not with alarm. With something closer to delight, quickly suppressed. You were afraid, the Queen said. Not a question. Yes. Of me. Of failing, Kale 7 said. You specifically are. He paused, because the honest word was terrifying and he wasn't sure honesty extended that far. Then, he decided it did. Terrifying. But the fear is mostly about what I'm carrying. 11 years of my species waiting to be seen as worthy. That's heavy. The Queen's expression shifted. It was subtle, a fractional change in the set of her jaw, the angle of her head. But the two guards nearest to her shifted their weight simultaneously, and Kale 7 had the sudden intuition that this small shift in her face was something they recognized and were responding to, the way sailors recognized a change in wind before they could have explained how. Leave us, the Queen said. The room did not question her. It simply entered, smoothly, quickly, with the practiced efficiency of people who had rehearsed this moment without knowing it. High Council members filed through side doors. Guards moved to perimeter positions outside. Even the child rose from her cushion, though she paused at the door and looked back at Kale 7 with an expression he couldn't read. He was alone with the Queen of the Velkan sovereignty. She descended the throne steps. Not rushing, each step deliberate, the star material of her throne catching light behind her as if reluctant to release her. She stopped 6 feet away, which was closer than any Velkan official had ever stood to him, and studied his face with those mercury eyes. Do you know what your species application says? She asked. I submitted much of it myself. Then, you know what it does not say. He waited. It does not say what humans are afraid of, she said. It lists your achievements, your technology, your expansion rate, your diplomatic record. It is a document designed to make you appear without weakness. She tilted her head slightly. Every species submits such a document. We have reviewed 412 of them across 800 years of this sovereignty. And the species we have accepted into membership, she said, are the ones who eventually stop performing and say something real. Kale 7 felt the ground shift under him in a way that had nothing to do with gravity. 412 applications, he said slowly. How many accepted? 19. The number landed like a physical thing. 19 out of 412. And humanity had spent 11 years trying to be impressive, trying to appear capable, stable, worthy, trying to hide their wars and their chaos and their spectacular, persistent capacity for self-destruction. We've been doing this wrong, he said. Your predecessors were very accomplished performers, she said. The faintest inflection in her voice, Not quite warmth, but the shape where warmth might eventually grow. Your daughter, she stopped. Forgive me. Your child. I have a daughter, he said, surprised into the admission. She's 7. Does she count rooms when she's frightened? He almost laughed again. He caught it this time, not from protocol, but because what he felt was not amusement. It was something more complicated and more vulnerable. She hides under tables, he said. And then, she asks whoever finds her what they're afraid of. Because she thinks being afraid together is better than being afraid alone. The Queen was quiet for a moment. That, she said finally, is an interesting strategy. It's a 7-year-old strategy. 7-year-olds, she said, have not yet learned to be ashamed of accurate observations. She turned and walked back toward the throne, not climbing it but stopping at its base and resting one hand on the arm of it the way someone might rest a hand on the shoulder of something old and familiar. I will ask you a question, Ambassador. It is not on any diplomatic protocol. You may answer however you choose. He straightened. Ask. What is humanity afraid of? The question filled the room. It was simple and enormous and it deserved an answer that was the same. He thought about the briefings, the analysts, the 11 years of careful performance. He thought about his daughter under a table. He thought about the laugh, sharp and sudden and real, the first real thing he'd done since stepping onto Velkan Prime. Being alone, he said. We're afraid we are the only species that feels things this loudly and breaks things this often and keeps trying anyway, and that everyone else in the universe has already figured out something we are missing. We're afraid that when you see us clearly, all of us, the wars and the waste and the beauty and the stubbornness, you'll decide we are not worth the trouble. He held her gaze. And we are afraid, he said, that we'll spend so long trying to look worthy that we'll never actually become it. Queen Sereth looked at him for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, not soft, but precise in the way that quiet things are when they carry weight. The 19th species we accepted, she said, had a representative who cried in this room. Not from manipulation. From exhaustion. They had been asking for membership for 16 years. The Queen at the time asked why they still wanted it after so many rejections. The representative said they couldn't stop because their people needed somewhere to belong, and they believed this sovereignty was built on the same need, and they were right to believe it even if the sovereignty had not yet proved it to them. She paused. We accepted them within the week. Kale 7 said nothing. Your laugh was not the joke, she said. Your laugh was the first sentence of an honest conversation. I have been waiting 11 years for humanity to have one. She turned to face him fully. I am going to call my council back, she said. And you are going to tell them exactly what you told me. Not a performance. Not a document. What you are afraid of, and what you want, and why you keep trying. Do you understand? Yes. They will push back, she said. Some of them find honesty destabilizing. Let them push. Do not retreat into performance. I won't. She looked at him one more moment, that measuring look, those silver eyes finding something in him and cataloguing it. Then, she moved to call the room back, and, as she passed, she said quietly, almost to herself, Your daughter is right. It is better together. The doors opened. 43 beings filed back in. The High Council took their places. The guards returned to their posts. The child settled back onto her cushion and immediately found Kale 7's eyes, and he saw in hers the gold-veined question she hadn't asked aloud. Well, he didn't smile. Not yet. But he let his shoulders drop, just slightly, just enough for her to see, and he watched her face change the way faces changed when they recognized something true. The Queen ascended her throne. The room settled. And Kale 7 stepped forward into the silence, carrying 11 years of careful performance and one honest laugh, and began to speak. He told them about the wars. He told them about the recoveries. He told them about the generation ships launched by a civilization that wasn't sure it deserved to survive but launched them anyway, because that was what humans did with doubt. They moved through it rather than waiting for it to lift. He told them about the little girl under the table who believed fear was better shared. He told them about 11 years of performing competence while being terrified, and how the performance had felt necessary and how it had also been a kind of cowardice, and how the child on the cushion with the gold-veined eyes had seen through it in 3 seconds because she hadn't yet learned the particular dishonesty of trying to seem stronger than you were. The council pushed back, as the Queen had promised. One member, a Velkan elder whose rank markings indicated 50 years of service, asked how humanity could be trusted if they admitted to such profound internal conflict. Kale 7 looked at him steadily and said that a species without internal conflict had stopped questioning itself, and a species that had stopped questioning itself was one nobody should trust with galactic membership. The elder was quiet. Kale 7 kept going. He spoke for 40 minutes. No document, no prepared remarks, no diplomatic calibration. Just the truth of what humanity was, messy and brilliant and terrified and stubborn and furiously, persistently alive. When he finished, the room was quiet. Queen Seraphirel did not look at her council. She looked at Kale 7. "The council will deliberate," she said. "You will wait." He nodded. He took his place at the far end of the chamber, and he stood, and he did not count the people in the room. There was no point. They weren't going anywhere, and neither was he, whatever the outcome. He had said something real. He had stopped performing. It had either worked or it hadn't, and no amount of counting would change it. The deliberation lasted 22 minutes. When the council turned back, the elder who had challenged him spoke first. "The application of the human species," he said, "has been reviewed by this council." A pause, in which Kale 7's heartbeat was the loudest sound in his own body. "We recommend acceptance." The Queen's voice followed, formal and resonant, filling the hexagonal chamber. "The Velkan sovereignty formally accepts humanity into galactic membership, effective this session, registered and binding under the accords of the founding charter." Kale 7 did not laugh this time. He stood very still, breathing carefully, feeling the weight of 11 years lift and be replaced by something heavier and better, the weight of belonging, which was not lightness but substance, not relief but arrival. The child on the cushion was watching him. He met her gold-veined eyes, and he let her see everything: the fear, the exhaustion, the enormous complicated joy of a moment that had almost not happened, that had nearly been lost to performance and polish, and the careful dishonesty of trying too hard to be seen as worthy. She gave him a single, small nod. "Told you," it said. "Better together." The Queen spoke his name to formally close the session, and Kale 7 answered with the Velkan acknowledgement he had memorized from a briefing document 11 years ago. And, for the first time in 11 years, it felt like it meant something, not because he had earned it, but because he had finally stopped pretending he already had. Outside the chamber, 43 beings moved and talked and filed into the business of a new political reality. Inside, for just a moment, an ambassador stood at the center of a room carved from collapsed stars and let himself feel the full size of what had just happened. Not the triumph of it, but the truth of it. He had laughed at the wrong moment. And it had been exactly right.